Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is this week we're going to be talking about the Plucky Squire, which I sat down and played and completed this week. And then Cameron, after finishing Astrobot and getting almost all the bots, has moved on to Bloodborne, revisiting Bloodborne, inspired by our friend Andy Cortez. So he's going to kind of share his refreshed thoughts on that, I guess. So that's kind of what we have to look forward to in today's episode. The Plucky Squire review I'll keep largely spoiler free, but if you want to go in completely cold, there will probably be some light spoilers in terms of like some gameplay things and a little bit of not like too much in the way of story stuff, but you know, maybe stuff from the first couple chapters of the game. So keep that in mind. But if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So yes, jumping in at first to the Plucky Squire. This is a game that I don't remember when we first saw it, but whenever we did, I was like, oh, that looks like a cute idea. For those that don't know, you play as Jot the Plucky Squire, who is a character in like a children's storybook, like a little adventure book, little picture book kind of thing. And your world becomes a little bit under threat by the big bad of your adventures getting access to, they call it out in the game itself as meta magic that lets him interact with the real world. And also thrust Jot into the real world. So Jot gets pushed out into the real world outside of the book at some point. Basically, we get a little 3D Jot that is running around on this child's desk where the book kind of sits for the majority of the game. And you can interact with various things on the desk. You can jump off the desk if you want. You'll die, but you can do it. You'll pop a trophy the first time you do. So basically, and then you'll get like little powers over the course of the game that lets you kind of interact with the 3D world as well as the 2D world as Jot and his friends try to kind of fix the story that the evil wizard Humgrump is trying to rewrite in his favor. Very charming little art styles. It's weirdly a Devolver Digital game. This is something like I would expect it to be way more of like a Humble Bundle kind of game. Obviously, that they've gone through a whole bunch of stuff recently, so that's not really a thing now. But like, it seems like this would be much more in like a cozy game kind of category of publisher compared to Devolver Digital, which tends to be more on the like very adult side of things. But yeah, overall, you're running around as Jot. You got a little sword in hand. So you're, in 2D form, you're fending off little goblin creatures and various, and bugs and stuff like that. Various little like baddies in 2D. And then a lot of them start making the jump to 3D too when you're out and about and like searching for things on the desk. You're running around with your kind of cohort in the land of Mojo. Your pal's Violet, who's a little aspiring magician / wizard. And
oh, cool. Okay.
Thrash, who is like I think he's like a mountain troll, like part of a mountain troll kind of community. And he's like, and all the mountain trolls are like into like rock metal and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
And he's a drummer. And so like his, idols, are very excited to go to, I don't remember what the name of it was called, but it was basically like a rock and roll version of Valhalla, is kind of like what they're aspiring to, very kind of like Viking culture coded and stuff. So those are your kind of trio of friends that are kind of helping you along the journey at various points. And then your advisor is the wizard Moonbeard, who is a Dumbledore / Gandalf type, who is aware of the world outside the storybook, doesn't need to be thrust out there to like learn that. That is new information to a lot of other characters in the book. And then the big bad is Humgrump. And so those are kind of your core characters on this adventure. And it's running around. It's like hack and slash in terms of like the combat, the active combat stuff. You can there's like a currency you're kind of acquiring from either like cutting down bushes or enemies that you can use to buy weapon abilities. Like you start with just kind of a hack and slash with your sword. But you can buy an ability that'll let you like throw your sword boomerang style. You'll get one that's like a jump attack and a spin attack, or basically like the other attack types you can get, and then you can power them up over the course of the game with more and more kind of like pouring more and more money. You can buy like a jump attack level 2, jump attack level 3 kind of thing. Cool. It just does more damage or does like a wider range or something like that. But combat, largely very simple in this game. It can be made even more simple through like accessibility options. If you want to throw in like a one-hit kill option, you can do that. If you want to turn on invincibility, you can do that. And the game itself does have like an adventure mode, which is kind of normal mode, and then like a story mode, which is easy mode, and I think is probably already doing a lot of those like, 1 or 2 hits will kill most enemies kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I played through normal and was never really feeling any kind of challenge to the game, which I think is fine. It's a very like a all ages friendly type of game, a la Astrobot. Save like it doesn't have the challenge level type things that Astrobot has that can be a little bit harder and kind of the more meaty, chunky things of that game. This is very much like, hey, like this is a game I suggested very earnestly to my sister at lunch.
Nice.
I thought like she, doesn't play a ton of games, or she's very much like she's a Stardew kind of person. And so when it comes to like action or combat focused things, I think this would be a game she would enjoy and could get into very easily, without having the frustration of like dying over and over again, any of that kind of stuff. Very charming art style, of course, like the little 2D animation, storybook stuff. But also they play with like how those characters look when they go into 3D and what that dynamic looks like. They also you'll have moments where like Jot goes from being this like little cute 2D Legend of Zelda Link Link to the Past style Link character model-esque thing to like all right, he rips off his sleeves and he's super jacked kind of thing. And they play with that kind of stuff. There are scattered boss fights throughout this game that kind of switch up the gameplay a little bit in terms of just like mini game styles and stuff like that. Like one of the first ones you'll do where Jot becomes super jacked arms. It's because he's fighting a honey badger in a Punch-Out style sequence where like your little Mac and the honey badger's there, taking swings at you and stuff like that, and you're trying to
you're fighting a honey badger. That's just asking for trouble.
Yeah, fighting a giant honey badger because you're trying to get some beeswax, and the honey badger was stealing the honey.
That's what they do.
There are. As the game progresses, you start acquiring abilities that let you kind of play around with within and without the book. In particular, a lot of the puzzles in this game are... did you ever play Baba Is You from a few years back?
No, I did not.
So Baba Is You was like a little puzzle game where there would be like words in the kind of scattered in the game, and like you would pull and move words around to like reframe the thing to solve a puzzle. So instead of Baba is you, Baba is door or something like that. And okay, you've pulled the U out, you've put the door in, and now you can go through the door because the Baba has turned into the door or something like that. Whatever it is. This very much has that same kind of like puzzle solving thing where it'll be like, the gate is open, and you'll walk by and you'll see like a little kind of flurry of magic on open. If you whack your sword at it, open becomes a loose word that you can now pick up open and replace it with something else.
Okay.
I guess the puzzle would be like the gate is closed, and then you'll find open as, the word somewhere else on the page, or especially once you kind of start progressing through and you start getting like the 3D world abilities, you can pop out of the book and you can flip back through pages. Like you get a power that basically lets you control and lets you, like, they're basically gloves that let you turn pages back in the book. You can never go further in the book than you've actually progressed in the game, but you can like go back to earlier pages of that chapter. Game's like 10 chapters, I think. So yeah, you're in chapter 3 and you come across a thing that says the gate is closed, but there was a thing a couple sequences ago where the open field or something like that. So you go back and you pull open from that other page, bring it on here to the new page, and the gate opens. And so you kind of play around with that kind of like puzzle solving elements. Even those are on the like very easy side of things, especially because the Moonbeard character has like mini beard, I think is what he went by. Where it's basically like little miniature moonbeards are kind of scattered around any of these like puzzle things, and they'll basically give you the answer in a very, like if you go talk to him, he'll say, wow, it'd be really great if you could find the word open or something like that to open this gate. And so it's very, like I've seen reviews kind of highlight that like the game doesn't really trust the intelligence of the player. It kind of gives you the answers very upfront in a way that is maybe less than satisfying for some people. There were plenty of times where I was like, I know exactly what I need to do. I just need to find where that word is or wherever it is. So, but there were a couple times where I was like, this is a clever little puzzle, or like what other elements do I need to do? Because in addition to like the ability to turn back pages, you'll eventually get like stamps that let you, stamp something down on the book, which will maybe lock something in place, or maybe you'll basically drop a bomb in a spot and can, blow up an obstruction or something like that. So kind of figuring out how to utilize all those tools that you start collecting is where the game like really starts to shine. And I would say probably like the midway point of the game. Before the game ultimately starts reaching kind of its end game and starting to wrap things up. But yeah, like overall, it was a very fun time. The game has a couple series of collectibles. There are art scrolls that you'll find kind of scattered throughout the world, or you can buy them in the same shop that you buy like the attack power-ups and stuff like that. And those art scrolls, there's like 50 of them in the game, and they're fun behind the scenes kind of like art pieces, like concept art or like alternate designs of sequences or stuff like that. And they'll have like a little bit of like narrative of like here's an idea. It's very like behind the scenes kind of stuff, which is a cool little element to invest in. And then there's a collectible that has 10, and they're called glitch birds. And these are just kind of like little creatures that are hidden, usually one per chapter, somewhere in the series of levels, and you basically are trying to find them.
Little collectible, basically.
Yeah, just a little collectible guy that's kind of out there in maybe those tend to be the puzzles that the game doesn't tell you what the answers are. Those are like the hard mode puzzles of this. Of like, they're still pretty easy to find a lot of times. Like they might just be hidden behind a thing, but you wouldn't necessarily think to go and like walk behind that thing and find the creature or something like that. Or maybe they'll be off the beaten path. Or there was like one that was like, as you progress through the game, like as you progress through the story, the book itself is like flipping through the pages and stuff. And there was like one thing where it was like, I realized that the story was really only happening on like the right page of the book. And a couple pages later, I get to a portal where I can the game has various portals where you like that are kind of the like, here's where you can hop out of the book if you need to find a thing, and here's also like, or if you're outside the book, here's how you can hop back in. And so there was like a couple pages later a portal thing where I could jump out, and if I jump out the book, flip back a couple pages, I could see that on the left unused page was like a little hidden portal that I wouldn't have otherwise seen in the storybook itself, that was hiding a glitch bird or something like that. So seeing cool little things like that of like, oh, you got to be like extra observant sometimes to identify those. Overall, a very fun, charming little game. I did. I mentioned this to you a couple days ago when we were recording. I did encounter a couple of like bug issues. In particular, there was one area where I thought I knew the solution to a puzzle, and so I tried something, and the thing that I did basically like
broke the
glitched
game.
out and removed a crate that I needed to like set on a switch.
Yes, I remember you telling me about this. Yes.
To actually progress through, and so with that crate gone, I couldn't get through the puzzle, and there was no way of like getting the crate back. Like I tried closing the game out and reloading it, and the crate was still gone. And I found that, and so basically I just couldn't progress through that. But I did find, and I found like one other person who had encountered this issue, but hadn't like identified a solution for it. I ended up managing to find that like the game, because the game auto saves for you, but it keeps like a few, saves back. So I was able to load an older save from before I headed into that room and like encountered that soft lock. But yeah, that like in doing so, in reloading that old save, the thing I found out later was that reset my glitch bird count. So like the trophy tracking had gone from like the 5 glitch birds that I'd found, it dropped back down to 0. And so the next one I found, instead of being like the 6th glitch bird, ended up being like glitch bird 1. And so I had to, so by the time I finished the game, even though I had found all of the glitch birds as I went through, the game didn't track it properly. And so I had to end up, that was like the one trophy I was missing from the platinum. So I ended up going back, replaying through everything, throwing on like all of the accessibility things just to like rush through everything as quickly as I could, which was good and also revealed like an issue I have in terms of like replayability of this game. None of the scenes are skippable. Like all the dialogue, all the animation of like the storytelling and all the stuff, all the narration that's happening, like there's no way to skip through any of it. So that was a bit of a bummer. But the game also has a chapter select thing, which is very weird because the chapter select also resets the count of things. So if I had tried doing just like the chapter select and like, okay, I'm going to jump into chapter 1 and I'm just going to go until I find the glitch bird here, it wouldn't have mattered because when I jump into chapter 2, it would have reset the glitch bird thing again. So I was like, well, you have to basically get everything in one playthrough if you want to actually pop the trophy, which is a very like niche trophy hunter kind of concern to worry about, but it is something that like even the, Power Picks Trophy Guide or whatever has kind of like, hey, this is a known glitch and issue, so if you're going to try and do this, get everything in one go. But I eventually did. Another accessibility thing that I did appreciate, while you can't skip the cutscenes, you can skip the mini games, i.e. the boss fights.
Yeah. Okay.
So like, if I was like, I don't feel like fighting this honey badger again, you just push pause, select skip cuts or skip mini game, and boom, it starts playing the cutscene after the fight and stuff like that. So some of the things where I was like, this just isn't like this. This is fun enough, but I don't want to spend the time doing this. I just want to get through this so I can get this trophy and call it a day. That's an option for you if you want. Or if you're, struggling with any particular mini games, that's just another cool accessibility functionality thing for you. The last thing I'll call out in terms of like just the like aesthetic and charm vibes of the thing. There's a midway through the game, you kind of get to the like central city of this land, which is like the castle town of Artia, Artia. And it is just littered with like art Easter eggs and stuff like that. Like there's a character in there called Sal, and he lives in a melting clock house as a nod to Salvador Dali. You'll interact with, I believe the character is like McGreen or something like that. And it's basically the guy in the bowler hat that has the green apple in front of his face. It's that, famous art piece. And is like, it's just a reference to that. You'll encounter like an Andy Warhol's type of character who's standing by a pyramid of soup cans. And so like as somebody who like enjoyed art studies and stuff like that in high school and college, just seeing like a ton of silly, cute little references. Like Van Gogh's in there. I think he's called like Vinny or something like that.
Nice.
But he's like painting sunflowers. And,
oh, that's awesome.
and so yeah, just a ton of fun little like Easter eggy art thing elements like that. There are other. There will be sequences like when you go into the 3D world to like find an ability that you need to progress through the next chunk of the story. Those also have some fun like playing around with gameplay. Like there was one sequence where you get like a jetpack and you can kind of like strap the jetpack in this little 3D world around and use that for some extra traversal stuff. And the end sequence of that game turns it into like a little bit of a Resogun style like shooter where you in the Lake Between Worlds kind of style, you jump from a 3D world into like a 2D mug, and you're flying around this cylindrical mug with the jetpack on and like a laser gun and shooting aliens or something like that and saving humans very specifically. So it was a fun little just a weird little Resogun-esque nod to that.
That's so sick.
Lots of fun little like Easter eggy / just fun little like, hey, this breaks up the monotony of just hacking and slashing kind of enemies in terms of the gameplay. But yeah, in especially in like a replay through where I was just like rushing through everything to get the collectibles that I had missed or had not missed but didn't get counted appropriately the first time through. A couple of the extra like seams started to show, but still a very fun time. I mentioned the other day when we were talking about this, the biggest like, it's not necessarily a tonal disconnect, but there is a disconnect between like the gameplay and the art style being very much a for all ages kind of like approach to like the actual dialogue and the characters themselves kind of referencing more of the Devolver Digital adult style of humor in moments, or just like the example I gave was like they'll just throw out a simulacrum as like a term of what's going on here, and expect an 8-year-old playing this to know what a simulacrum is, and it's like I barely know what a simulacrum is, and I only know that from D&D.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit like, I think, over its skis in some of the like storytelling beats for the all ages audience in a way that like Astrobot doesn't. But still very fun. I think when we talked the other day, I was kind of floating between like a 7.5 and an 8. I think ultimately I'm going to give it an 8. I think this is a great experience, a great little game. But there is very much a like, if you're looking for a challenge, this game is not for you. This is a very like, hey, you can turn your brain off a little bit, play through this, have a fun time, enjoy a cool little art style thing, enjoy a fun little story. I haven't gone too deep into the story, but the the ultimate like part of the thing that the big bad is trying to do is rewrite the story so he ends up coming out on top. And there's this like meta thing of like, nobody wants to read those stories, so if he succeeds, and the reason we don't want him to succeed is because that will put our book on the shelf and nobody will ever read it again, and it won't inspire the child whose room we're in, and the ripple effect of like the magic of our world will go away because we'll be locked on a shelf and will never be read by children. It's very like it plays around with some Toy Story vibes in that regard. And so it's a cool, interesting approach and a fun little story to that with simple gameplay, but they do a good job of like mixing up the gameplay over the course of the, I'd say maybe 8-hour experience, probably. If you turn on more of those accessibility things or do story mode only or whatever, probably an even shorter time. But especially playing it on as a PlayStation Plus, I think it's like PlayStation Plus Extra or whatever. It's free this as of launch. Otherwise, it's like maybe $20, something like that, probably. But yeah, this is a very fun game. So giving it an 8. It ekes over the good line for me into great territory. I had a very fun time with it. It's probably somewhere in my top 10 for year end. But it's probably in like the 6 to 10 range, I think. I think there have been certainly experiences this year that speak more to me directly. But yeah, a very fun time overall. So any questions before we move on to Bloodborne for you?
No, I mean, well, I think, yeah, I kind of answered where my thoughts were about, like, where did you have it kind of like in your placement for that. But I mean, I'm glad that it's an 8 for you. I'm glad that it ended up being that charm, ended up winning over any sort of like stress at, like, stressing the seams of the game, and finding those bugs and stuff. But I'm glad that you, like, this is an interesting one of those games where I feel like people are like giving like 8s or 9s, or they're giving it like 5s and 6s. And it's like, this is definitely like your mileage may vary type game. And I mean, one thing I will say is I'm happy that people are enjoying it. It's definitely not my cup of tea. For what I've seen other people, hearing you talk about it and seeing what other people have been talking about it, it's definitely not my cup of tea type of a game. But I love that it's out there. Especially because it's like this game has been in the works for what, 3-4 years by some indie devs. So like, massive shout out to, like, I mean, I forgot who says it. I think it might be Greg Miller, but like the fact that any video game comes out is a miracle. So the fact that you can get like a dream project like Plucky Squire out there, that it's received as well as it has been by the majority of people, and that you yourself have enjoyed it, just makes me really happy. Like I think with how bad the games industry can be sometimes, seeing something like this come out and kind of like hit for a lot of people is just such a nice, wonderful thing.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, developed by All Possible Futures. It doesn't look like they have at least in Wikipedia, it doesn't look like the development says like this is when they started working on it. But founded by James Turner and Jonathan Biddle. Cool little. Turner was a designer for Game Freak, so did some stuff over with the Pokemon people and whatnot. Yeah, very fun little. Again, like this is a couple years ago, like Bear and Breakfast was like one of those that like it caught my eye from like the art style, and I was like, I want to check that out. This has been one that has been on my radar for a while. And when they, announced a few weeks ago that it was going to be, a PlayStation Plus game, I was like, oh, cool, excellent. Like, it was already on my radar. It was on my list of games to pick up when it came out. And the fact that I didn't have to throw any extra money down towards it was very much like, oh, cool, no harm, no foul. Had a good time with it. There was a game that it reminded me of, and I'd forgotten the name for a little while. And even right now, I'm not going to be able to pull the full name. But it was like, RPG.
Saturday morning RPG?
No. I remember that one too. No, this was like RPG something. RPG Time: The Legend of Right is a game that I played a couple years ago. Had a similar vibe in terms of the whole RPG is the creation of like a meta child who has made this RPG out of like arts and crafts supplies, like book supplies, stuff like that. Like you are playing through his notebooks in very much 2D, but there are some elements that do pop out into 3D, and maybe you're doing something with like an actual pencil is your sword or something like that.
A much more simpler, wholesome version of Drawn to Death, basically.
Yeah. Very, very similar vibes in some of that element. But that was a game like I remember I had followed RPG Time for a while in terms of like when it would show up in showcases and stuff. And then when I finally played it, I enjoyed, a chunk of it, but it lost me. It ran too long. It was sometimes like over designed. And this has some of those elements, but very much managed to kind of not outstay its welcome, for me at least. So I think that would but playing through this reminded me, I was like, what was that game from a few years ago? And I couldn't find it for a little while there until I finally stumbled upon it. Because it was just like I remembered elements of it, but like the name being like the RPG Time, The Legend of Right. It's like that's a whole bunch of like non memorable stuff if you don't remember the character's name was Right or something like that. So it took me a little while to track down which game I had been thinking of, but that was it. And very similar vibes to that game from a couple years ago. It was a very like indie game. I think it launched on Game Pass or something like that, and then came to other consoles later. And yeah, it just didn't hit with a wider audience in the way that I think this one did, because this one having the Devolver backing behind it, I'm sure helped them get it in front of the big site's eyes and stuff like that, so you can get a review roundup for this thing, or you can get your Gregs over at Kind of Funny sitting down playing through it. And yeah, like so. I fully understand, and I think Greg gave it like a 6.5. I think is where he landed on this one, because it just didn't click with him, or was too slow or too easy. And I fully get a lot of those elements, but worked for me. It's like I would say it's almost a game geared towards Greg's son more than Greg.
Sure.
In terms of like difficulty and accessibility to the game, but it would be one that like, hey, father and son should play it together so father can explain some of the things that are going on to the son kind of aspect. So but yeah, overall had a fun time with it. It's one that is currently in my top 10. A few more heavy hitters still coming out this year. I don't know if it'll stay in my top 10 by year end, but maybe it'll at least be like an honorable mention. Or there's no way it's going to fall out of like a top 20 if I end up getting enough games to that level. And yeah, apart from a couple bugs here and there, and just kind of a poorly implemented count tracker for its collectibles, no real major complaints. Just a little simple, fun, charming tale. So those are my thoughts on the Plucky Squire. Let's throw it back over to you, Cam. Talk to me about Bloodborne. This is a notoriously game that I have a history of myself, so I'm curious what you've been doing with Bloodborne in your revisit here.
This one has this was a tortured experience for you.
Yeah,
you went through hell playing this game.
Yeah. For those
charity.
who don't know, I historically had never played any of the Dark Souls games or Soulsborne games or anything at this point, and had zero interest in really playing them. But for Extra Life one year, I committed to doing a 24-hour Bloodborne stream where I was going to donate $1 for every time I died. I think by the 24-hour end, I think it was like 170 some odd deaths. Ended up raising like over $1,000 because of people coming and joining the stream and stuff like that. So that was very cool. And
shout out to Tony Horvath for hopping in.
Much thanks to Tony Horvath, exactly, for jumping in, helping me with a couple of the boss fights. There was one that like I did one shot, and one of the big ones, Astria or Mystria or something like that. She was a big like spider-esque lady in a cathedral. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Spider.
I feel like she was a spider lady. Maybe not spider lady, because spider was very much Rom, which is where I tapped out. I did not defeat Rom, but I killed her in 2, and everybody's like, "Oh my god! You killed her in 2?" After taking 4 hours to get through the Cleric Beast, taking another 4 hours to get through Father Gascoigne, I was nearly broken and came very close to like just rage quitting and canceling the stream and ending early. But people like Tony coming
Amelia the Vicar is who I think.
Yeah,
she turns into like a giant like wolf lady with like. But here's the thing, tons of hair.
Yes,
tons of hair.
That's probably
easily for you to be like, that's that a spider? But no,
yes,
no.
Amelia Vicker. Yes, that is. I killed her on only my second attempt, which impressed a lot of the people that were watching the stream at the time. But yeah, that is my history with Bloodborne. Made it through 6 or 7 bosses. Kind of fought Rom a few times, but never was able to successfully get through Rom. and basically like called it there. But have not gone back since. And so you did. So what are your? Whereas you were much more like you were way more fan of Bloodborne anyway. So,
Oh yeah.
what you been doing in revisiting Bloodborne? Just jumping in because you can, and unlike me saying like fuck it, I'm just gonna get Mother 3 as like a little fan made cartridge. You know that they're just never gonna do a 60 FPS, and you're not gonna go through all the rigmarole that Amy did to get a 60 FPS.
And nor do I think it's like technically necessary.
Yeah.
Like for me, it really comes down to like I've seen also like the struggle that happens, like the game adapting to 60 frames per second. Sometimes things just like don't work out the way that they should. Like it really stretches that game to its limits, which is why like the PC port version, like emulation, is supposed to be like that's where it's gonna be at. But for me, it's just like I just really want to replay the game. I historically, so when I was originally playing Souls games when I first started, I really didn't do any side quests. I didn't really know there were side quests or didn't really care to. So when I played Bloodborne, I just mainlined it, and then at the very end, like I gave the option to like quote unquote the good/bad ending, which is just like you make a dialogue choice, and I didn't realize that was a dialogue choice. That I was like, oh, was I supposed to? If I chose the other one, I'd fight him. So instead I got that ending, and I was like, cool, I beat Bloodborne. Nice. Didn't do any like additional side bosses, didn't do any of the other content on it. Didn't do any like side quests or like, and so like this time around, I'm like, okay, going back in, because now that I know all about that and I found the joy of.
So you've never done all that stuff.
No, never.
It's not just like, oh, you didn't know about that the first time around, but then you've gone back and like replayed.
Nope, this is the first time I'm doing it. Because I've notorious, like for me, the Bloodborne was the one that I did not like the combat the most in. And that's just because of the, I never cared for the, parry mechanic, the kind of like shot parry, where you have like 20 bullets, and if you like practicing cost resources, and I always hated that. It's an aspect of it that I just didn't care for. I much prefer, whether it's Elden Ring or the Dark Souls games, or even Sekiro, where when you die, your health regeneration tool resets. Like I like that more than I prefer the like having to stock up on like 100+ blood vials, because like it sucks. Okay,
I do remember.
Yeah,
there was a good chunk of time. I think I did this in Demon Souls 2. Where I was just kind of going through the same sequence just to like stock up on stuff on like health potions. Gotcha.
Yep. So like I do not care for the itemization of those things. I don't like that your ability to do the parry and eviscerate mechanic is built into an expendable resource. Especially because like as you're learning new enemy types, you burn through 5, 10, 15 bullets getting down their parry timing right. And so it's really annoying to have to like grind for those out, the reloading new areas, going back, get 4 here, 3 here, 2 there. It's all very monotonous. And I had never done what is affectionately known in the community as the cum dungeon. It's called that because it's basically there's a side boss you go to, and you beat them and you get a chalice, and that chalice lets you get into basically the like procedural generated like level stuff, the labyrinth.
Yeah. I remember that being like one of the big things they were touting at the very first PSX almost 10 years ago, where I, fun fact, sat next to Bloodborne developers in the front row of the original PSX keynote thing. Like I remember them showing off like the Chalice Dungeon stuff.
Yep. So the Chalice Dungeon is that thing. You can do one where you put in codes, and somebody discovered a couple years ago, or like maybe 4 or 5 years ago,
they found like the cut ones or whatever.
Yeah. Well, they found one of them like that is the. This is why it's called the cum dungeon. It's CMMM FPG or something like that. And so so people have called it that. You open up the first door, walk out, turn to your left, and look, and you'll see a health bar decreasing. And when that creature dies, because you're seeing it, like observing it, you get the blood echoes of it, and it gives you like 83,000 blood echoes. So it's like super easy to break the game at that point, because you can basically just hit max level if you want. And it's totally doable. And because it's built into the Child's Dungeon, that's its whole thing. Like, it's considered like it's like the bird exploit for Elden Ring runes. It's similar vein. Like, this is not like a bug.
They never patched this out. It's still in there.
Yep.
You can still do it. So yeah.
So it's considered totally viable and fine. A lot of people have been in the past like, well, I don't know about like, maybe this, and it's like, nope, it's part of the game. It's part of its thing. Like, Souls games are notorious for like the developers being like, we're cool with people using the bugs and exploits in our game to beat the game. That's still a valid way to play. And so, yeah, I use the common dungeon. I'm like level like 56, and I'm just getting through the forest right now. Like, I'm in the middle of the forest of like getting to, through the, I'm in the forest area. You know what it is. It's after the cathedral.
Is that where you fight like the 3 shadow wraith kind of?
I haven't gotten to them yet, but yeah, that's like the area where you do that. It's before you get to Bergenworth.
I don't remember.
That's where you fought Ron the Vacuous Spider
or anything like that.
So yeah. Okay. No, so I'm going through this, but I'm also checking the wiki to be like, hey, am I missing any side quests? Unfortunately, I did botch one of them, which is the...
Did you get the music box for Father Gascoigne?
I didn't do that.
Oh. That's one thing I did in this game that you have not done.
I botched it. I didn't realize that because I was like, oh, Father Gascoigne.
Yeah, it was also like, I only found it because I think Silent Angel in the chat, shout out to Angel, was like talking me through it of like, hey, go to this door, knock on it, talk to the like, or let whoever talked to you and tell you the story or whatever, and they'll give you the music box. And like, that was my first like real concrete introduction to, oh, this is what like passes as the game giving you backstory and stuff, is getting a few lines of dialogue from a character behind a closed locked door, but they give you an item that gives you a little bit of additional context. And I was just like, all right, this is wildly obtuse to like naturally stumble upon that in the game. Is like, okay, you're just trying to like knock on every door at this point, right? That's if you don't know this is here, how do you ever find this kind of stuff? And it's just being like, yep.
It's just people. It's it's rewarding people for exploration,
Sure.
And it's
I would say neuroses, but yeah, exploration, neuroses, whatever.
Tomato.
Either or.
Yeah. So I missed out that one, but I've gathered all the other survivors. I did not realize that.
Also, it didn't really help me with Father Gascoigne. He still kicked my ass another 7 or 8 times.
Yeah, he's just a hard ass boss. Yeah. Like, he's a hard ass motherfucker. But yeah, so I've been doing all the survivors and stuff for the like, and I met the little like decrepit dude who's like, tell survivors to come to my church. I have these incense that keep the monsters away. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I met one guy who's like, it's like, how do I get him to like leave his house? And so I look it up, and it's like, oh, you have to also unlock the other place, like it's like a clinic. And I was like, well, I've already sent everybody to the chapel already. And so I went over, unlocked Iosefa's clinic, went back to the guy, and it's like, oh, but the thing said, tell him the opposite of where you want him to go. I was like, well, I don't want him to go to the clinic if everybody's already at the chapel. So I sent him back to, so I told him to go to the clinic. So he went to the chapel, and then he shows up, and he's like, ha ha, I'm smarter than you. It's like, ha 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 ha, I have the wiki. So like I knew what I was doing. And yeah, I've just been having a good time exploring Yharnam, being like super leveled up and just like really enjoying my time through this game. I'm not here for the challenge. I'm just here to kind of like enjoy and do things that I haven't done before. I'm much more doing like a touristy version of playing through this game, which is a fun way. I like, it's how I also like to play through like.
It's very much the opposite of how you played through Elden Ring the first time, of like, you weren't looking for anything. You were determined to find every little nook and cranny of that game yourself.
Oh yeah, no, the thing is, I learned after playing through Dark Souls 3, I stumbled upon like, oh, this is how they designed their side quests. I got further into that, and I'm like, okay, this is very cool. And people were like, well, the Bloodborne has some of the best ones. And I was like, well, I missed that. I'll have to go circle back around it sometime. Now sometime. Elden Ring, yeah, 100%. Elden Ring was me exploring every cave, everything, and I was like not trying to not miss out on anything. Yeah. But also because you get rewarded for killing enemies in those areas and whatnot. Like you get runes and stuff, and like it does. I think Elden Ring is the best example of rewarding exploration in a From Software game. I think that overall Bloodborne has, because I think it has like some very strong weaknesses to it as far as like it's, like I mentioned up at the top, like the item concert, like there's like I don't want to use the eviscerate mechanic here on this enemy because I only have 5 bullets left. And I don't want to use that. Also, I'm using a repeating pistol right now, which uses 2 bullets at a time. So I'm being very paranoid about it.
I don't remember ever, maybe this was just my build, I don't remember ever running into like a concern over ammunition. I remember running into concern over like potions and healing and stuff, but and that, like, I was never great at like the parry counter combo thing anyway, so maybe that's it. Maybe I just wasn't using that functionality.
That's
fair. But yeah, it's like you expressing all of this concern is just like, oh, I mean, like, yeah, I've probably suppressed a whole bunch of memories of that 24 hours anyway, but that's definitely one I don't recall really ever worrying about too much.
Yeah, for me, that's just a frustrating point to it. Another thing also is that this
is why you don't give a shit about keeping track of how many arrows we have in D&D.
100%. It like ammo tracking pisses me off.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a shooting game, where like that's a core part of it is keeping track of that stuff. Then I care about it. But like, yeah, not here. Not like I don't like. I want to be running around, hitting stuff with my. I got the Ludwig sword. And I got the long sword plus the great sword combo with that. I got the repeating pistol, so I don't have as long between shots. It shoots 2 bullets at a time, and it has like that, like it's a quick reload aspect to it as well. So I don't have to worry about like if I miss a parry, I can just immediately hit it again and get that parry because of it. Which is also why I burned through so many bullets. All that being said, like I'm still enjoying the hell out of it. It's great. I've been really engaging with the lore in a deeper way because I'm gathering so many different items. Because I have like all these blood echoes, I can buy the additional items and like level them up and like really test out some stuff that I never tested out before. And really enjoy that aspect of it. Before I just used the saw blade, trick blade, and then the Ludwig sword exclusively for those two. But yeah, no, I'm enjoying my time with the game. And also it's been years since I played the game, so going back through and like replaying through it has been a blast. So I'm really enjoying my time.
Sure. Watch, they have a state of play next week or something where they announce this alongside the rumored Horizon remaster and all that stuff. Like, hey, we're bringing back all these games for PS5, including Bloodborne. People go fucking nuts.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but you know, if it does, cool. More power to those fans. Probably not going to get me to jump back in.
People screaming, "What is Blue Point working on then?"
Yeah, sure, yeah. Maybe they're just making their own Demon Souls 2 or something. I don't know.
Oh, that'd be sick as hell.
All right. Well, I think that will do it for this episode. Thank you, Cam, for chatting Bloodborne with me, as well as letting me chat the Plucky Squire. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, we just put out, last Friday, we put out the episode of That D Plus show for Agatha All Along. We watched the first 2 episodes, gave our kind of like early impressions and review. Go ahead and go check that out.
Indeed. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. This week on That D Plus show, we'll be doing Inside Out 2. So if you are interested in that one or if you're one of the few people that seemingly didn't go watch it in theaters, it drops on Disney Plus this week on Wednesday. So watch that and come join us for the conversation on Friday. Yeah. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, once again, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.